These numbers below are called BITSI, or burnt-in timecode. SIMPTI, which doesn't stand for seconds, minutes and some other stuff. It actually stands for the Society of Motion Picture and Television Engineers. So they determine hours, minutes, seconds and frames. It's a visual cue of where we are in the film. But wait, it appears that we're 10 hours in. What have you missed? Well, it all concerns something that is absolutely fundamental to the production of moving pictures, and that is pre-roll, pre-spool, or leader.
This leader is provided to permit the projectionist to complete adjustment of focus and sound level before the film begins.
If we just ignore the hours and the frames component of the BITSI below and compare that to the absolute time code displayed on YouTube, you'll see they're out by exactly 8 seconds. This is because YouTube feels that the start of the movie was that 8-second leader at the beginning, which the viewer doesn't usually see. And this is why TV starts at 10 hours, or in the case of this video, which started at 9 hours, 59 minutes, 52 seconds and 0 frames. And what you're watching is actually not a movie, it's a talkie. Movies originally were just moving pictures with some pianist or organist playing alongside. Talkies happened with the commercial release of Al Jolson's The Jazz Singer.
Wait a minute, you ain't heard nothing yet.
And why did it take so long to put sound to picture? Well, fundamentally at the heart of it is the synchronization of two entirely different mediums. And in the case of films, departments. You have the visual editing department, you have sound, dialogue, music, and all the way up to modern day where you've got stuff like CGI departments. Timecode is absolute king. It's what keeps us synchronous. And the two factors fundamental to synchronicity is agreeing on a start point and a speed at which we run. Now, you'll see from this leader here that it's already telling us nicely there that this is 24 frames per second, which is standard for film. But I can already determine this by looking at the BITSI on screen. If I just run forward, there, it'll go back to 0 after 23. Because it counts frame 0 as 1, this indicates that it's 24 frames a second. Now, if that's standard for film, why do we need to agree on a speed? Well, for example, TV in this country actually runs at 25 frames per second, and I believe in America, is it 30 frames per second? So the BITSI is already indicating the speed in which we're going and the time at which we start. Why does it have to be 10 hours, though? I'm going to shift the sound for this video out by a frame from here. Now, you'll see it just makes it look slightly uncomfortable. How about 2 frames? Even weirder. But what about 5 frames? It starts to look like a total car crash. And this is only 1/5 of a second, which is convenient because our eyes only see at roughly 24 frames a second. Our ears, however, are far more tuned in to these differences in sound. So what I'm going to do is take this beat, I'm going to duplicate it, and I'm going to shift the copy out by 5 frames. Let's try that just at 1 frame. So about the time that we start at, when you're synchronizing anything or any group of people, you need to count them in. You don't just start a race by firing a gun. It starts with a...
On your march.
This is exactly the same principle with film. Not only do we need to start at the same time, we also need to start at the same speed at the moment that we start. Whether it be a record player or a tape machine or even a projector starting up, there's always a time between it being static and running at full speed. How does this apply in the digital world? Well, for YouTube, it doesn't matter. It's simply presenting something at you. When it starts, it'll run at full speed. There's a lag, agreeably, between usually hitting play and it actually playing, but it starts at full speed. But even in this modern digital time, you'll see, for example, I need a bit of pre-roll for my expression and modulation control here, but also a bar to tell the conductor when to tell the band that they've got a bar until they hit go. When we all start, will be different. The conductor will be aware of it starting before the band is aware of it starting before the audience hears it starting. And this follows throughout film and the different technologies and mediums that are involved that come together to be synchronized. The two most important fundamental facts remain that we all have to start at the same time and we all have to start at the same speed. And that time is the beginning. And there's a problem with time in that respect because time is unidirectional. It doesn't go backwards. Now, you can trick technology into thinking it's counting backwards or counting down by using offsets. And this is why we start at 10 hours. But why 10? Why not simply say, for example, start in minus time? Well, technology doesn't like that because time doesn't go in two directions. But more importantly, for any of these departments, these different people working with different technology, you need to avoid any avoidance of doubt, any opportunity for confusion. You'll see with this BITSY, we're already counting in three bases: base 25, base 60 twice, and then base 10. Now, the editing department don't even work with SMPTE. They work with feet and frames, which is why we refer to moving pictures, moving media, as footage. So how many frames per foot? Well, that also depends on whether you're working on 35mm or 16mm. So already we're not only talking between various different bases, we're also mixing up imperial and metric. So the solution for film is simple. You simply start at hour 1, and all of the departments have up to an hour's worth of pre-roll or leader should they need it. They won't. All of my reels start at the various different hours within this timeline. So this is 8 seconds before hour 1, 8 seconds before hour 2. So we've got the SMPTE universal leader there, 192 frames of notice. This works really well with film because traditionally film spools or reels could only hold just over, I think it's 2,000 feet of film, which is roughly 22 minutes. So in cinemas, you'd always have two projectors, and towards the end of a reel, a projectionist would wait for a startup cue in the top right hand of the screen, which appears for 4 frames at 11 feet from the end of the reel, which signals the projectionist to start up the second projector, which is pre-spooled to the 8-second mark on the universal leader. And then there will be a second cue 1.5 foot before the end of the reel, at which point they perform the changeover, which is basically killing the lamp on the first projector while switching the lamp on the second. And hey presto, you're right into your next reel with no perceivable break in exhibition, onto your next 20 minutes or so. Films are still made like this to this day, as you can see here. It's convenient that you can unlock reels without messing up the timeline for the rest of the film. But also these are a delivery requirement. Some films are still played out in reels of no more than 22 minutes. But television, as a continuous linear form, doesn't work in reels, which is problematic when you're working on something that's longer than 1 hour. So when I used to do Poirots, those would be an hour and a half long. And if you were to work on the film system, you'd simply ignore the first hour until you went into the second hour, at which point, again, we're forming this weird kind of subtraction. It's a bit confusing. When you're in the second hour, are you 2 hours in or 1 hour and a few minutes in? Which is why many years ago it was agreed that television would always start at 10 hours, and provided the programme you were working on wasn't longer than 8, this would give you plenty of time to work with. All you have to do is completely disregard the very first digit. When you move in to the second hour, it'll say 11. Ignore the first one, you're 1 hour in. I've been very fortunate to write a number of film scores, and this has left me with a kind of a hardened film sense of respect to this process. So I'm always deeply disarmed when I'm provided with a picture to score to which doesn't have a leader on it, particularly if, as often does with productions, it fades up from black. There's no real way of knowing when the picture has started, so you just have to accept that 10 hours is the beginning of this digital file that you've got. I also have a deep distaste for starting music on frame zero of any reel or production. And this goes back to the proper projection days, where sometimes with more modern projectors, they would work on bigger horizontal platters. So it would take the reels, the 22-minute reels, and splice them together by cutting out bits of the film. So not only do we have to be wary as film composers of not going across reel edits with music because of the jump that happens with the projectionist, but also you could lose entire numbers of frames. So as composers, we have a tendency to make sure that we're a good second or two into the reel before firing the band up again. There's nothing more pleasant than starting a reel and having the actual time code in Pro Tools and the bitsy match, and at the very end, that to remain true. It means we started together, we ended together, and we all went at the same speed. Thanks, as always, for watching till the end. If you have any more trivia facts about the SMPTE Universal Leader or anything else that I've discussed today, please don't hesitate in putting them in the comments down below. I always read them. More nerdy tidbits like this coming up soon. And this film I'm scoring, well, I'm going to do a massive series taking you through the entire process. If that sounds interesting to you, subscribe, ding the bell to be notified the next time I put a film up. And one of those, always much appreciated.